Yeah, so if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. I think that'll just help this conversation run a little bit more smoothly. Okay. Just present here. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Oh, you can. So you can see the Diaspora House session piece. Is that a yes, Brian?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Awesome. And you can see the yellow on the left and the property on the right. And this picture here is a property we're going to be looking at in Nairobi. And I put it in here. It's not a stock photo. It's actually a picture that I took. So please pardon my poor photography skills. Well, my name is Joe Kinvey. I'm one of the organizers of Diaspora House, alongside Kobe, who's based in Dublin, Tendeka, who's currently in Durban, and Dami, who's based in Dubai. It is a global community of real estate enthusiasts and investors who want to own collectively real estate across Africa and its diaspora. I'll keep it brief because I have more stuff to show in terms of when we started, progress we've made to date, and etc. All right, Diaspora House, this is who we are. We own and manage assets across the diaspora. We currently have one asset in Nairobi, looking at the second one, and I think since November, so we've received a lot of interest about Cape Town. Hence, because many of us don't know much about Cape Town, we decided to invite Brian and Lynn here to essentially tell us a little bit about the city. All right, well, I am going to take the screen down and bring Lynn and Brian over to introduce themselves. And we have a couple of questions that we'll touch on in terms of background, about Cape Town, what to look out for, etc. And without any further ado, I'm going to take my screen down and we go into it.
Thank you so much, Joe. Good evening to everyone that's tuned in, and afternoon if anyone else is tuning from a different time zone. My name is Brian, and I'm joined by my partner Lynn Knight, who's also we've recently actually partnered. So she's got an extensive background in property development in Zimbabwe, which is my home country, and also has been to the UK and has business interests in the UK. So maybe before I jump in, I'll just let Lynn maybe just introduce herself very briefly, and then I can then run with everything, with all the questions from there on.
Hey, evening everyone. My name is Lynn, as Brian said, and we're partnering together just in terms of a passion really to see an unlocking of real estate in Southern Africa. And obviously today's call is focused on Cape Town, but we have portfolios in a number of different places. And so we're just excited to work with you guys to see how we can just see a real flourishing of the work that you're doing, and seeing, real estate produce dividends, produce yields for you guys. So it's a pleasure to be with you, and I'll let Brian lead.
All right. Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you, Brian. So for folks who are on the call, please, if you have any questions, just drop it in the comments, and we will make sure to answer any questions. A lot of us are new to Cape Town. Well, I am certainly new. I've been there quite a couple of times, but I know nothing about the real estate market there. And I don't know how many people know about it. So instead of us trying to self-educate, I think we want to essentially speed up our learnings by bringing people who are experts in this space, hence Brian. Brian, I'm going to give you back the mic and maybe just start with some introduction background. You mentioned that you're from Zim, and how you ended up in real estate.
Yeah, oh wow. Thank you so much. So Yeah, I'm from Zimbabwe, in a town called Bulawayo. I was born here, so my folks are still in Zimbabwe. I'm actually sitting in Zimbabwe at the moment. I'm sitting in Lynn and I's offices. So yeah, I've been in South Africa as a whole for 16 years. I decided to make my home Cape Town. I lived in Joburg up until very recently. Um, I went to Cape Town because I had a dream, which I know is absolutely bizarre. But when I was 18, I had a dream of Table Mountain, and I'd never been to that country in my life. To be fair, I'd never been outside Zimbabwe. So I come from very, very humble beginnings and with a very strong, prayerful mother. And she thought because of that dream, it was a sign that I needed to go see this place. So she had a few savings that she had cashed out in 2009. And that's how I then hopped onto a bus. I got into the streets of Johannesburg, and surprisingly, a relative that was meant to take me in was just a no-show. So I had to leave on the streets of Johannesburg. I cleaned buses for about 2 days so I could save up some cash to get to Cape Town. I got to Cape Town on the 24th of, wow, yes, I got to Cape Town today. Today is my anniversary. I got to Cape Town on the 24th of Jan 2009 and lived at a train station for 5 days, believe it or not. So strangers just played a strong role in absolutely everything. From there, how I even as much as got accommodation was through strangers as well. And then my first job was as a restaurant cleaner in an area called Durbanville, which is in the winelands of Cape Town. And from cleaning tables, that's how I got to serving breakfast. From serving breakfast, that's when a very well-traveled European family that owned a Remax franchise in Cape Town decided they could turn a salesperson out of me. Thank God for meeting that very brilliant couple, because present day, since the day I met them, I've sold just under 800 properties across South Africa, in both Johannesburg and Cape Town. Obviously, with very well rooted interest in property and in prop tech. So I'm all about how technology helps streamline and makes anything easier, which is why through technology, I sold 80% of the number of properties that I've sold without ever living in Johannesburg. And I did it from Cape Town because I was just leveraging off technology. But obviously, we represent clients that are all over the world. I mean, most of our clients are Zimbabweans that live in other countries, and all their property interests when it comes to South Africa are channeled and controlled by us. And a number of people obviously buy a number of our offerings in Cape Town just because of how majestic it is to live in Cape Town. So I've lived in the winelands of Cape Town for over a decade. I'm in an area called Constantia, which anyone that's been looking in that area may know that area. I've done a lot of work with developers across the Atlantic seaboard, in the West Coast as well, in Bloberg, as far as Stellenbosch as well. I'm quite a huge fan of our wine. So yeah, I think I'm probably one of the few people that's been to every wine farm that Cape Town has to offer.
Thank you, Brian. Great background, super humble. And it's good to see the progress from Zim to where you are now. I mean, a lot of us are here on the call to essentially learn about what it looks like to do real estate in Cape Town.
Mhm.
You share like what you know in terms of history, background, like how the ecosystem has progressed to where it is today.
Yeah. So firstly, I think Cape Town has been performing insanely well for a very, very long time. You could almost say Cape Town stands out as its own country in South Africa, because Johannesburg and Cape Town is like comparing apples and bananas. The lifestyle aspect in Cape Town is very, very beautiful. It's a very multicultural sort of community, meaning, you know, you've got people from all parts of the world. It's known as the Silicon Valley of Africa. So a lot of tech companies are obviously headquartered in Cape Town, which also improves a lot of tourists coming in and everything. We've got Table Mountain. There's a lot of history to our infrastructure, a lot of history to some of the landmarks that we have. I think one other thing to mention, which is such a draw card for Cape Town, is our restaurants. We are known for absolutely mouth-watering food. If I may stand corrected, but I think we have about 4, if not 5 restaurants that are in the top 100 restaurants across the world. And all of those are in Cape Town. And I think 2 of them are actually in Constantia, to be fair. So now it's the culture. It's obviously it's the ocean. We've got beautiful views. It's Table Mountain. It's all the wine farms that we have. I mean, we've got Durbanville Wine Farm. You've got some wine farms out in Stellenbosch, and you've also got Constantia Wine Farm area as well. In Constantia alone, they've got 14 wine farms open. Well, they've just closed Eagle's Nest. It's no longer, you can't go wine tasting there anymore, so it's down to 13. But you can almost imagine one suburb boasting 13 wine farms surrounding it. It's unbelievable to someone in Gauteng, you know. I don't know if there's anyone sitting here from Johannesburg, but yeah, so Cape Town is beautiful in that regard, but definitely it's just the culture. It's a perfect blend of people from all over the world. I've honestly never been outside of South Africa in my life except Zimbabwe. But because of living in Cape Town, I've been exposed. I've had a Kenyan flatmate when I was in varsity. I've worked with this couple that helped me get into real estate is from Austria and Germany. I've worked with a lot of people from Denmark. I've worked for a company in the UK. I started one of the tech companies that I brought into South Africa, Property Inspect, is a company born out of London. And, you know, it's almost like a borderless version of the entire world. And I think that's why so many people just find it very welcoming, very homely. I've never experienced segregation in my life in Cape Town. I can't say the same about other places. And the exposure to just absolutely everything is great. Yeah.
Thank you. And just talking about like, the real estate market.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been in the space for a while. You've sold over 800 properties. Like for people like us who are not from the region and technically qualified as international investors, what should we be looking out for as we're dipping our toes in such a big diversity?
Yeah. So first and foremost, Cape Town, in terms of its property market performance, does significantly well. And I think that attributes to what I've already touched on, that it's such a beautiful place to live in, but also just from an administrative perspective, it's well run, the infrastructure is well maintained, etc., and all of that feeds into very impressive, or rather decent, let me use the word decent without overselling, a very decent capital appreciation. So when you buy property in Cape Town, because of all this buy-in that you have from the locals, as well as buy-in from foreign investors, you almost are guaranteed that, you know, your property would certainly appreciate in value. And because of it being such a huge attraction to people from all parts of the world, it also feeds into the number of foreign-based companies that we house in Cape Town, the number of foreign-based restaurant brands that we house in Cape Town. And it's all because Cape Town is one of the 8, Table Mountain, is one of the 8 wonders of the world. So that really does pull in people from all over. Now that feeds into so many other things. It means the rental market is quite healthy, both short-term and long-term. It also means because it's so well traveled that a number of people, instead of always cooking themselves up in hotels and Airbnbs, they'll rather just buy a lock-up and go in such a city that they frequently visit. So it's very welcoming to foreign investors, very easy to buy as a foreign investor. I mean, the red tape isn't much, to be fair. As a foreign investor that's looking to buy into South Africa, firstly, they will welcome you with open arms. If you're a cash buyer, even better. You certainly would just need to have a valid passport. You don't necessarily have to you don't have to buy the property from South Africa. So in other words, what I mean by that is you could be sitting in London and you're interested in buying a property in South Africa, and you just have to have your valid passport from there, and then you can do everything else remotely. So you can just request an offer to purchase of whatever property of interest you've found and sign it wherever, and just scan and email it back into South Africa for it to be countersigned by the seller and acceptance. So that's the part that I wanted to touch on in terms of Are there any barriers to entry from a physicality perspective? No, you can do it remotely. You don't need to have a residence visa as well, so just your passport. And then obviously, if you're buying a cash transaction, just because the finance board is trying to just reduce issues of money laundering, you will have to do it from a financial institution to financial institution. It'll be very, very bogus of anyone to maybe just rock up with a bag of cash. So yeah, it'll just have to be a bank transfer, but there's no limitation to it. There's also no limitation to how many properties you get to buy. There's no restriction as to how you could buy something something off auction that's maybe below R1 million, and you also in the same breath can buy a property of about 150 million rand. Because yeah, I think at the moment one of our most expensive listings that's out on the market in Cape Town, I think, is sitting just over 200 million, and it's out in an area called Clifton, which just borders Camps Bay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just talking about the acquisition process, what you're saying is it's relatively easy. You don't have to be a resident, like you can be a non-resident buy. And you talked about a cash acquisition. There's a question that just came in. I thought it's timely because the question is, what are non-resident funding options to invest, mortgages, loans, local banks? I heard in the past that foreigners can get up to 50% mortgage. Is that the case? Does that work for non-residents? Can you shed a bit of light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Joe. So the good news certainly is yes, mortgage facilitation is available to non-residents. And I think one other thing, a non-resident stands to get up to 50% of the purchase price. Ironically, so that because I want to say this for you guys to not feel like you're getting the short end of the stick. A South African that's permanently employed outside of South Africa also only gets a maximum of 50%. So a non-resident outside gets up to 50%. A South African working in Dubai gets up to 50%. Now, it's not necessarily up to 50% because we certainly, as My World Space, have helped a few clients that have got just over. But yes, the general rule of thumb is 50%. Now, the requirements, however, is what will determine just how big your risk profile is and how much the bank is willing to give you. You need to be permanently employed. The banks are really trying to stray away from people that are self-employed. So if you are permanently employed with a permanent contract, then certainly there's green light there. If you are contractually employed, then it has to be a contract of no less than 3 years, right? Then another thing they will need is the banks will differ, so the requirements are not the same across the board. FNB and Nedbank certainly, in my view, are the ones that are most lenient to non-South Africans, although ABSA and Standard Bank will still grant bonds. So what their requirements will vary a bit, but they will ask for anything between 3 to 6 months of your bank statements. It doesn't have to be a South African bank alone, and it doesn't have to be one bank. So you could be banked with multi-banks in multi-countries. And what we do for you, or what any mortgage originator will do, is consolidate all of your financial track record and send it through. And then they'll also ask for 3 to 6 months of your banks. Sorry, I've already mentioned that. 3 to 6 months of your pay slips, just as supporting documents. Then, of course, over and above that, the norm, which we've already touched on, a copy of your passport and proof of residence in the country that you reside in. So it's very straightforward if all your ducks are in a row in that regard. I just also want to mention there that so now in terms of how best they qualify you, a number of other factors come in. Are you buying property in South Africa for the very first time? Do you already have a portfolio of 10 properties? Brian, who's a first-time entrant, and Joe, who has 10 properties. Of course, we are different people. You probably have instilled more confidence into whichever financial institution that you're with. Whereas with me, I'm a bit risky. I'm based in Canada. I've never set foot in South Africa in my life. And here I am applying for a mortgage in South Africa. They need to cover their end of the stick as well. So And then another thing is, if you already own properties, then you certainly can use them as leverage, because how are these properties that you own already being used? If your properties are generating some form of revenue in terms of them being rental properties, then you could want to use that as some form of collateral to back your own personal application. Another thing, another factor that comes into play, which also as much as determines what sort of tax you need to pay per year, which also determines how much of an appetite the banks will have for your application, is in which legal entity you would be buying it. Are you trying to buy properties in your own name? Do you have an existing business in South Africa? We call it a PTY LTD in South Africa. Those in the UK and America will probably be familiar with the term LLC. So that's what I'm referring to right now. And the question around that would therefore be, is that business already trading in South Africa? How do the financials of that business look like? Yes, you are a foreign director of the business, but perhaps your business has been trading for 10 years with great financials. And here you are now applying. Are you applying as Joe in your own capacity, or Joe, the director of the business, together with the business? So you see, there are ways around that. You could also get financing through a non-trading company, as long as you get an auditor or qualified accountant, or chartered accountant rather, to issue an insolvency letter confirming that the business is non-trading. What they do in that regard, because the business has no financials whatsoever, is they then look at the financials of the faces behind the business, which are the directors. So when basically, I think to keep it short, you can stand to get. I know a client from Ghana that our originator managed to secure 90% for them as mortgage. Yeah. So whenever anyone says you can get a maximum of 50%, please don't send them my way to say Brian said you are lying. No. I'm just saying what I managed to do.
Super useful. I'm going to go straight into Q&A because we only have 3 minutes. The first one, question, which is, I've heard bonds, mortgages are really expensive. I know the current bond rates are at about 11%. Is that, can you just share a bit more light on that?
Yeah, expensive, I guess, is relative. Are they higher than other countries? Yes. I think almost double in the UK, the last I checked, if not close to triple. But yeah, we're sitting at about 11%. The State of the Nation address by the president normally happens first week of February, so that's coming up soon. And then right after that, the Reserve Bank head will also then give us a state of finances and everything. So currently it's at 11%. Do we anticipate another rate cut? Yes. The experts say we could see our repo rate go down, which we hope for, because it will just encourage more buy-in from people. But to answer in short, 11% is where we're sitting at roughly. Yeah. So that's the flat repo rate. It doesn't mean that everyone will get that interest rate. It all depends on your risk profile.
Amazing. And then there's one last question here, which is, how long do sales take to close? Are there typical bidding wars?
How long do sales take to close? Willing seller, willing buyer, to be fair. I mean, if you price your property ridiculously high, chances are known your property is going to sit on the market for months on end until it goes stale. So my advice is, if you want your property to move as quickly as possible, be as realistic as possible. But yeah, willing seller, willing buyer. There is no real timeline in terms of how quickly you can close. There is strong interest in any property in South Africa. You just need to price yourself right.
And how long do sales take to close?
Oh, so you mean from point of signing the offer to purchase? Okay, all right, I'm with you. So once you sign your offer to purchase and the seller countersigns in acceptance, and it's just a normal cash deal, then you're looking at about anything between 8 to 12 weeks. So the good thing about any benefits of the property, you only get to benefit those on date of registration, which is after the 12 weeks. Any expenses on the properties like levies and rates also only kick in when you take registration.
Awesome. And well, any parting words before you leave us, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, before I leave you, I think firstly, thank you so much. Secondly, I'd love to, I mean, if any of you are still keen to ask more questions, I'm always available. I'm sure you can reach out to Joe. He can give you my WhatsApp number as well as my email address. I am on LinkedIn as well, Brian with an I, Sango, your property guy. Cape Town is certainly on an absolute high. I think what I want to say, because the general consensus and feel is people try to be as close to Sea Point, Greenpoint, Camps Bay, and that's all that they really highlight. Cape Town has many, many other beautiful places where you still get to bask in the beauty of the city without paying nearly as much. For example, I have a beachfront apartment that I was staying in where I was paying 25% of what someone with the same view of the mountain would be paying in Camps Bay, and I was 20 minutes away from Camps Bay. I'm just further down on the west coast. Does it make absolute good returns on Airbnb? Certainly. It's a beach facing penthouse. Of course, with 180 degrees views of the ocean. So the media will drive and encourage people to buy into certain regions of Cape Town, but everywhere in Cape Town is very, very good. So do your research, see exactly what works for you price-wise, and rather get as maximum value for your money as possible. You'll rather get a bigger place in a nicer area still, because Cape Town is nice throughout, than restrict yourself to micro living just to be in a higher end market. There's everywhere in Cape Town beautiful. And
Awesome.
everyone loves just living there. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, guys. I won't take too much of your time.
Well, do me a favor.
Yeah.
While I'll share your details in the recording that goes out, can you please just copy and paste them in the comments so that people who are on call can take it? I think it'll be super useful. But what I'll do, as I send out this recording, hopefully tomorrow, I'll make sure to add your details as well so that people can reach out to you directly and, hopefully avail of your services. And as I don't know if many people know here, but Brian has been helping us with a couple of these. He's been some to us already as we're continuing a search in town, and we want to leverage people who knows the market really well, to buy a suitable property for the community. Brian, thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And yes, no pressure, but yeah, let's get you to sign that offer to purchase, eh?
It's not me, it's the community.
So I will do that shortly. Yeah, I'll put my contact details in the comment section. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. Cheers.
All right. Thank you all for joining the session. I'm just going to get my screen back. Feel free, if you want to drop off. Wait, somebody share my screen for me. Is it up here? Yeah, well, wait, who's sharing this? Is it Kobe or Zainab? I don't know who's sharing the screen. Please unmute yourself. Okay, well, yeah. So for folks who don't know what Diaspora House is, it's essentially a community of real estate enthusiasts and buyers. And what we do is we pull capital together to buy property cash, and then we rent it out at the end of the year. We distribute returns to everyone. So the process is we spend time going through property selection. And if you are in the Cape Town group, I've already posted some properties in there and asked people to give it thumbs up or thumbs down. That's the property search process. It has already started. And then once we find a property that we're happy with, in order to make an offer, we do a capital call. Capital call is we send a notice to be like, hey, you're interested in a property, please send your money. We essentially use some of that money to pay the deposit. And then we go through the documentation, the paperwork. For the first property, it actually took a while, but then again, it was the first time we were all doing it. So we're all learning as we go. And then once the property is ready, we furnish it, and then we make it available for rental income generation. The beauty about what we are doing is if me, Joe, I'm promoting a property that I own on Airbnb or other platforms, it's one person, right? But when you have 20 people that own a property, now you have 20 people who are able to promote a property. And what that can lead to is an increased occupancy over time. For Nairobi, for example, by looking at market research, occupancy is around 50 to 60%. With the number of people that we have, we really want to push this to about 80%, and then we can increase our returns. That's essentially the name of the game. And because everybody invests in USD, we want to be able to pay our returns in USD, and the annual return that we've set, at least for the first property, is 10%. We're hoping to exceed that, hopefully through a community effort. But yes, we really want to make the property available and provide return to people that have invested in said company, in said entity. Next slide, please. Yeah, well, return on investment is the number one reason why most people invest. And me, certainly, that's why I invest. And when I put money into any asset, I want to be able to make money back, hopefully higher than what the Fed will be paying or the S&P 500. So I think collectively we can try to beat the S&P 500. I don't know. Hopefully January 2026, we'll be having that conversation. Purpose, a lot of us here are of the continent or are interested in the continent, and we want to participate and collectively own a piece of Africa, which is such a beautiful place. And enablement, me personally, it's my first time getting involved in any real estate. So as part of this process, I've learned a lot, and I can officially call myself a real estate investor. And the goal is to also enable as many people in the diaspora, but also on the continent, to become real estate investors. And what we're saying is you can start with us putting 5, 10K, but over time, you'll have enough capital to go buy your own property. And like leveraging Diaspora House is a way to dip your toe into the market without being on the ground, because if you're not on the ground, it can be quite challenging. So for example, for the property that we just closed in Nairobi, myself, Kobe, we were in Nairobi, running around, going to the lawyer's office, doing furnishing, going furniture shopping. I don't certainly enjoy it, but it was an experience that I would recommend more people to do, especially if you haven't done this before. And I learned quite a bit as part of that process. Yeah, well, what's in it for you? Return on investment paid annually in USD. Discounted rental fees, and the way we've structured it is if you're an investor in a property, you essentially get charged the bare minimum for that property. Every year, we'll also open a liquidity window, meaning that you have the option to sell your piece of the asset, which makes it even more compelling for more people to get involved, because your money, compared to a whole real estate, your money is not tied in for 5-10 years. It's every year we open a liquidity window. We also have referral fees. So if you refer somebody to the community or to a particular asset, the fee that we've set now is 5%. So we'll essentially pay you 5% of that of that rental income. And what that means is the more referrals you make, you get to increase your return, your personal return on the particular assets. And lastly, over time, we want to enable investors who already have their own property to make available on Diaspora House. For example, in Nairobi, we don't plan to acquire more than 2 property until we know that there is an exceeding demand over the asset. But when we are buying property, we know there are people within the community who have assets that they want to list. So as an investor, you get that opportunity as well. As a community member, if you haven't invested in any asset, you can also remain a member. What that means is you make referrals, we pay you, we prioritize you when you want to book any of our properties. And more excitingly, for somebody like me who's on the road quite often, we get to connect as we move around. In December, also while I was in Nairobi, we did a hangout. There was about 30 people there, and it was really good to actually put a lot of faces to name that we see on WhatsApp and get to meet the Diaspora House community in Nairobi. As we're actively looking in Cape Town, we're talking about hopefully one of us going there to actually close the contract. It might not make sense because Tandeka is in South Africa, so she might have to make that trip. But again, as we all move around, the aim is to connect with more community members across the globe. Next slide. Yeah, so what we've done so far, we closed our first property. It's a 2-bedroom apartment in Winchester Garden in Nairobi, Riverside. We essentially collected and invested $110,000 in that assets. As we're speaking, we have a second asset in Nairobi that is 50% committed. And Cape Town, I checked this morning, we have, I think, $150,000. And what that means is we now have a lot of commitment, hence we're actively looking for an asset to acquire in Cape Town. In the WhatsApp, we have over 300 members, and of course, we've closed one deal. Yeah, I just touched on this. We saw a couple of properties, and I shared the link in the group. Again, this is not a commitment to purchase. It's just the property that we're seeing, and we shared it with you. If you haven't received it, please ping me in the Cape Town group, and I'll send it over to you. Next slide. Yeah, and as I mentioned, for the second property in Nairobi, we are 50% committed. I saw two people ping me about the capital call. I was supposed to issue it yesterday. I will do it later today or tomorrow. Yeah, so these are some pictures of the Marina Bay property. Myself and a lady called Natasha, we went to view it last week. I love it. I love the amenities. It's got a pool. The pool's not ready, but great location. It's in Westlands. It's beautiful. It's a one-bedroom, which is quite a big one-bedroom for all the property I've seen in Nairobi. And it's got 2 restaurants that are being built. It's got a gym. It's got a game room. And yeah, I'm super, super excited about it. Yeah, so buying the first property wasn't easy. There was a lot of learnings, and I actually plan to write about this process. Well, the things that worked, we understood the asset class quite relatively. And our parents, grandparents have invested in real estate over time. Also for Nairobi, it wasn't too challenging to find an asset. We spoke to a ton of agents. We spoke to a lot of property developers. We had a short list, and then we picked from Winchester. Also, the negotiation was quite straightforward. It literally took a call, spoke to the agent, then we landed on a price, which was, again, we are looking at the market rates, what are people paying, what are people not paying, and we were able to land on a price quite quickly. Also, building a community, I think myself, Kobe, Kandeka, and Dami, we already have a network, so it was quite easy to bring all of you together, and over time, somebody invites their friends. And yeah, we now have over 300 people in the community. What didn't work so well is the time to close. It took longer than we wanted to close. And it wasn't because we didn't have the money. We collected all the money a while ago. It was more the legal back and forth, signing documents, setting up a company. What sort of structure do we use? And we plan to, again, take a lot of learnings from this in order to make the future properties better. Collecting funds were actually not so straightforward, and that's because as a global community, you're collecting money in multiple currencies, and we're doing it manually. Going forward, we will be using Borderless not for the current Nairobi one, but we will be using Borderless, which is an investment community platform that makes it super easy for community like us to collect funds. Disclaimer, I'm the founder of Borderless, so just in case people didn't know. The KYC also wasn't straight because we're essentially collecting people's details via email, which is not ideal. Borderless will solve all that problem for us. And also the local setup, we finally wrapped up on that last week, and I think we have another call this weekend to close it out in terms of, as we buy more property in a said country, what is the right structure to own all these assets? And like for Nairobi, for example, we wanted to set up a company. We got a company name. They went back and the name wasn't available. They had to come back. It was just a lot of back and forth. But we're going to take all those learnings to improve the acquisition of the next asset in Nairobi. But also, as we go into Cape Town, we'll take the learnings to make it better there. Next slide. Yeah, well, we have a memo. If you didn't print the memo, I'm happy to share it with you. It's in the WhatsApp group. If not, just please ping me. You should be able to have my number to just ping me. So please check out the memo. The memo will evolve because we've done a lot more than what we put in there, i.e. we didn't intend to buy a second property in Nairobi, but there was a lot of demand. So we just listened to the community. Next slide. And yeah, Cape Town. Next. I mean, that's the reason why we're all here, right? Well, Cape Town, I'm not sure if all of you saw, but like it was the preferred tourist destination by Times Magazine this year. I was there in November. I love Cape Town personally. They also launched a global nomad visa. What that means is there's a lot of people moving to Cape Town. It's desirable for European, but also interestingly, a lot of African tourists. And my personal hypothesis is that Europe, you need to go and you need to go to Europe, you need to get a visa. But as an African tourist, you can go to Cape Town and have nearly the same European experience at half the price. And there is a growing tech. It's a growing tech city. There's a lot of investment in the area. While I was there, I met a lot of people from across the world who are either building tech companies or working for tech companies, and it's becoming a more and more desirable African city. And yeah, that's the end of my spiel. I'll take down the presentation and answer any questions that people have here. Yeah, Zena, please take down the, yeah, awesome. And also I'll unpin myself. Yeah, any questions? Are you on the WhatsApp? You get the link. Anything that I didn't cover that you wanted me to cover? Did you miss the start? Don't worry, you'll receive a recording of this session. And yeah, Maya, please go ahead. You're muted, Maya.
Hi, Joe. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, we finally meet in person, not via LinkedIn. So yeah, good to meet you. I just have a quick question. Who maintains the properties? So like during the periods where maybe you may not have a tenant in there.
Yeah, so right now in Nairobi, we have the person who's doing the interior design for us would also be the manager, and that comes at a cost, but it's nothing crazy. What you see in most cities is there are actually companies and their job is to do property management. And because at least right now, none of us are on the ground, we will engage a manager whose role is to ensure that the property is clean, it's maintained, people are checked in accordingly, people are checked out accordingly, and as we travel or renters travel, they have a good experience as they go on the ground. Over time, as we acquire like a large number of properties in a certain city, the aim is to actually build a property management company around it, because like why outsource this if you have 10 properties, if you can just have people who can do a couple of things for you as you essentially, like with more properties, it makes sense to have your own management. But for now, because we're only having one in each city, we will engage a property management company.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I am gonna assume that those are all the questions. Of course, I knew there would be one more person. Hey, Axel.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Just a quick question. Obviously, there's the annual liquidity period, but what happens in a scenario where you get an amazing offer for the property in 3 years' time, for example? How would that work out?
Again, that will go to the community, to the group of people who essentially own that particular asset, to make a decision whether they want to sell it or not. And it will come to a vote. For example, this first property has 21 people, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it has 21 people. And with 21 people, you can actually get a vote. You'll get 11, 10, or whatever the case is. But again, like, let's say we bought this property for 110 and somebody comes and make an offer for 250. I would be begging everybody to sell. Yeah, I mean, like as much as we want our own property, the collective aim, at least for me, is how do I get better return compared to what I would get in the UK, for example. So yeah, I think every sane investor would want to, juice up their return as much as possible. So hopefully we get something like that.
Yeah, that's the aim. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, it's good to see you, Axel.
Likewise.
All right, awesome, folks. Thank you. It's Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day. And if it's early, enjoy your day. For people who maybe like they know me in other place, I also run Hulk and I'm building Borderless, and now we're here. Thank you all for joining. And as we see more property, thanks to Brian, we will be sharing them in a group, and hopefully we can find something that we all like and make an offer soon. All right, enjoy your Thursday and see you soon. Bye.